What's up, everybody? I'm Fernando Mastrangelo. Welcome back to Design Discord. Today, I'm sitting with Lisa Perry. Lisa's got a really interesting story. Her family owned a textiles company. Growing up, her mother was a gallerist. She later was kind of becoming well known as a collector in the art world in the 80s and 90s. But that's not all she's known for. She's got a fashion brand that she started that's uses 60s iconography. She got really heavily involved in politics, helping Hillary Clinton get elected to the Senate. And now she's in her latest iteration. She's focused on Onna House, which is this gallery in the East Hamptons and in SoHo that is solely focused on women designers working specifically in craft. It's kind of an amazing project. It's getting a lot of attention right now, and we wanted to highlight this and talk to Lisa about her beginning, her life, through collecting, through politics, and what she's doing today to really advocate for women and to empower women and get their work shown. So, Lisa Perry, welcome to Design Discord.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me.
My pleasure. This is going to be fun. So you have a very interesting life. It kind of starts with textiles in a way. And because your father owned Dana Mills, but your mom was a gallerist, and she sold art and craft, which becomes very crucial to your story. But I want to just go back to growing up a little bit outside of Chicago.
Yep.
Talk to me about what that was like around, with the business and then your mom being creative. What were you absorbing at the time? What was like growing up in that environment?
Yes. Which is probably the basis for everything I'm doing now, which, of course, I didn't realize.
Until later.
Yeah, yes, in hindsight. So, yeah, I grew up in a very, very artsy home around creatives. My dad, even though he started a textile business, was really an artist. He, did Jackson Pollock type paintings in our basement, and they hung all over our house. And he wrote a couple books. He was a real, the true beatnik, from the 60s. And so a very, very artsy guy. And then mom, pretty much the same, but she did it in a little bit different way. So in 1968, she opened up a gallery specializing in craft. But she helped artists in a different way. So mom, we had a cousin who worked he was a professor at the University of Illinois. And the professors, as so many are, were artists, but they didn't have anywhere to show their work. So through, this cousin who asked my mom, would you be open to opening up a gallery for these professors? And she said, sure. And sure enough, it was filled with ceramics and glass and jewelry. And so looking back, it was part of my DNA.
But then you decide, I'm going to study fashion, or you go to FIT. I wasn't sure what you studied, actually, because I couldn't find that. But I figured you studied fashion.
I didn't.
You didn't? What did you study?
No, I didn't.
Okay.
So I was working at Dana Mills, a family business, for a little while, and I decided that New York was calling. New York was calling me. And so I applied to FIT in the textile technology major.
Okay. That makes sense.
So that was really, it wasn't design oriented. It was really very technical. I was learning everything you can possibly want to know about a piece of fabric, picking it apart and looking at the warp and the weft and, fiber content and dyeing practices. And so it was really very technical because that is what our business, was really about, that side of textiles. So I studied textile technology. I was able to get in, some electives such as color theory and, things that, interested me a little bit more. Yeah. And, but I didn't have any fashion classes.
Okay. That's interesting because we'll talk about that a little bit later. But But then you go back to Dana Mills, right? After school, no? And spend some time at the business?
Well, so when I graduated, yes and no. I didn't go back to Chicago.
Okay.
But we had a New York office.
Yes.
And so I worked in the New York office of the textile company. And then, my life started happening where, I met my husband and I became pregnant with twins.
Mm-hmm.
And so, work kind of, took a sideline then.
And then, of course, in the 80s, you start to collect. It says that you and Richard would go down to SoHo and start popping into galleries. I just want to think, like, the 80s is such a huge time for art. It was really like the boom time. So to be in that era, what were you guys looking at those times? Like, was this the formation of what you were starting to collect and thinking about, or?
Not at all.
Okay.
It was an interesting beginning.
Okay.
So Richard had a friend whose father was a big collector. And so he kind of, in his teens and, early 20s, always saw this art, which was actually by, some of the very, they became popular, the 80s artists such as, Eric Fischl
mm-hmm.
and, those kind of Jennifer
like
Bartlett.
Or this, yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so we would go to the galleries and that's kind of what we knew. And, it was contemporary art at the time. It was, it was really fun to do that. And, with our double stroller.
Oh, really?
Yes. And so art was always, it carried over from, my growing up and then Richard really growing up with art as well. And so, that was, what we did for fun.
Would you say your eye or taste was different than Richard's?
Well, no, I think we were very much aligned.
Nice.
When we went to the galleries, we would always, we would pick something we both liked. And I didn't have like a style yet.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like, that developed over the years. And it's very interesting. And, we can talk about it more as this goes on. But, how many times my style kind of morphed. Mm-hmm. But then I'll let you know what my true passion is.
Well, I think I might know what it is.
Really?
I mean, I don't know. I think so.
Okay.
I mean, it would be hard to deny that the 60s have had a huge influence on you for some reason. And I'd love to understand a little bit of why the 60s. So I think that the 60s are kind of like the pivotal thing for you. And because pop art, minimalism, color field, these movements kind of come out of that time. And also you're passionate about vintage clothing from that time period. So I figured that would be the era that you're most interested in, but correct me if I'm wrong.
And I think that is kind of, it makes perfect sense.
Okay.
Because of course I had a brand,
correct,
a fashion brand based on those great designs in the 60s. But I think that happened accidentally because of my passion for vintage clothing from that mm-hmm. era. So, at one point, and growing up, outside of Chicago, I would always go to, vintage stores. And I always loved vintage for whatever reason. And so as I, got older, I started collecting a very specific genre of vintage, which is the, Curates, Rudy mm-hmm. Gernreich, Pucci, all of those incredible designs from the late 60s. Yeah. So that became my passion and what I basically wore all the time. For 10 years, I wore only vintage of that clothes. And that's, basically how my brand started mm-hmm. because everybody would say, "Oh, I love what you're wearing. Where can I buy that little mm-hmm. Curates jacket or, that cute dress?" And I'd say, I'm sorry, I can't direct you anywhere because it's vintage and they're really one of a kind at this point. So that's kind of how I fell into the 60s because I really love the clothing.
Do you think, well, there's also a relationship between the 60s and like the women's movement and things like this that develop in that era, which kind of thread throughout your life, you know? And so I kind of, that's something that I saw and I was like, oh, maybe that's why this era is also important to her, you know, because
I think later on, again,
Right.
later on, I realized my passion for women's rights and,
Right.
you know, specifically women's reproductive rights and helping women who, you know, from whether it was, you know, different states or wherever, you know, I started getting, you know, involved a little bit in politics and looking, you know, looking at that. But it was very, it did not enter kind of into my realm when I was just, you know, collecting the clothing.
It was like in the 2000s that really
yes,
started
that right,
That's
exactly. That happened later. You're very good
But
at
the thing is, I
research.
thought that it was that the 60s, I don't know, because you were so focused on the 60s that was kind of like, I see the thread, you know, that's how you sort of end up in the 2000s kind of, and then where you are today. But, well, let's talk about the company, when you launched in 2006, because we were talking about that a little bit, and I want to touch on that because you then were collecting for so long that like the art started to kind of influence your fashion as well, right? Because I mean, you did collaborations where you had artist prints on the fashion. So tell us a little bit about the brand and how it came about and the launching of it in 2006.
I think that what happened, the sequence, it was more, so I started, you know, wearing, you know, all of this clothing, you know, I fell in love with it, all the vintage clothing. And so, you know, that started probably in like 1998. And, you know, I remember that, you know, pretty clearly. And so I think it was the clothing came first. The love of collecting vintage came first. Then in 2000, we buy this apartment that we decide, you know, I was like, wait a minute, I love the clothing from that era, but let's look at, because, you know, before that we were just collecting this contemporary art. So now we start to say, let's look at the 60s, that era as a whole. Richard Oretti, you know, was passionate about the music. I started, yes, I was passionate, you know, Gloria Steinem was on my radar and, you know, the icons, you know, from the women's movement. Right. And then I say, you know, why don't we look at the art from this period? And that's how that came to be. So from this apartment that we bought in 2000, we said, let's have that be the collection in this apartment, and let's start to look at pop art from the 60s. And so that was kind of how that evolved. And so I'm already wearing the clothes. Now we're looking at the art. And we're looking at the furniture, and we're looking at the civil rights movement, which Richard, you know, had a passion for. And so it all kind of came together in this very organic but not organic way, and it became very, very focused.
Well, how did you then decide I'm going to start this brand? I mean, you know, and dive into, because it's not something you had done. It wasn't something you studied. No. You know, but it had kind of been part of your life in terms of from textiles. I'm assuming they sold to fashion brands and things like this.
That was a home furnishings company. Oh, home furnishings. So it was home furnishings. So no real fashion, a little bit of children's wear. But so I think it was because of the recognition from people on how they liked this style that I said, you know what?
I could do that.
Yeah. I said, why don't
Well, you have become an expert at it, obviously, from, you know, buying it, wearing it, kind of.
Yeah, I kind of did. And I said, let me just make a few samples. Let me call a friend who I know who also collects vintage and may know a sample maker. And it all kind of came together. And I just started making samples. And I was just going to make them for friends, to maybe take an order and have a private little business in my loft in SoHo. That was what I thought was going to happen. But then the brilliant retailer, Jeffrey, walked into, I called him for his opinion, and he walked in and he saw the first 10 samples and he said, I want to buy this collection. And I was
for
like,
the
what?
store.
Yes, for his
That's
store.
Awesome.
And I said, no, I'm not doing a collection. I'm not, this is just a little private thing.
Okay.
And anyway, he said, no, I'll hold your hand through it and it'll be great. He said, you have something, special here. Jeffrey also, loved that era and that the fashion from that era. So it was amazing. And, that was in 2006, I came up with the idea. In 2007, it was in his store.
Wow. And I mean, you took it all the way. I mean, you guys did collections for many, many years.
We did. Yes, I remember, we had a great 10th anniversary. Yeah. And then shortly after, it was, I had retail stores and I sold wholesale. And I decided that, just first of all, I love projects and I'm always, kind of trying to reinvent myself. And so
I get that sense. Yeah.
I feel like, maybe I was kind of done. I liked working with the customers and I liked the one-on-one and I liked helping women feel good about themselves in these, very, beautiful designs, but I didn't like the fashion business.
Yeah.
I didn't like the fact that like you finish one collection and then, you
got to start another one.
Women's wear comes and says, it's great. What's next?
Right.
And it was too frantic a pace for me. And also these designs were ones that were very classic. And, even if like camouflage was big that year, that wasn't going to ever be for me.
Right.
So it was.
No, I appreciate those. As an artist, you kind of, that happens, where you kind of end an era and you say, okay, like I contributed a certain thing to that. Yeah. So how are you? So you're running the company during that time, but you're also getting politically involved. So now you really take your, from women's movement and whatnot, and you kind of bring it to like reality, and you start helping Hillary Clinton, who I feel like you're close friends with at this point, really run for Senate and then later for president. So
yes,
talk a little bit about how that happened and why you felt inspired to kind of like put yourself into that sphere.
Yes, it was really something again that, I felt passionate about. I feel like I've always had this yearning to help women in one way or another. And so I was asked, I have a very close friend who was involved in Democratic politics, and he asked me to give a certain donation to a male senator at the time. And the first question I asked my friend was, is he pro-choice?
Oh, okay.
And my friend looked at me like, really? Like, does it matter? And I was like, yes, it matters. I decided at that moment, I'm not going to give any contributions or help any candidates that are not pro-choice. It was something that, in this broader scope of helping women, that was something that was very important to me. And at the time, there were 91 men and 9 women in the Senate. And the imbalance was just so huge. And I said, how are 91 men making decisions for, women's bodies? Like, how is that even a thing? So that's when I said, we need more women in our Senate. We need more women in Congress. And so
you said that your mom and your sister were early feminists. Do you think that that's where that passion comes from to help women, or where is that passion? Me also, I wondered if in the art world you saw an imbalance in that time period as well, like in the 80s and 90s. Like, there are many women that show, but it might have been a heavier, more weighted towards men. I wonder if all of that kind of had played into that.
It probably did more like subconsciously
Yeah.
at that point.
Yeah.
But yes, I always have, had this passion. And probably, from my mom and sister. My sister was, an early activist. I remember, she was always marching for some cause. And yeah, I saw how hard my mom, worked with 4 kids. And I just really have empathy for women. And so, yes, I think that then I was in a position that maybe I could help on a broader scope politically. And it just took one meeting, one lunch with Hillary to kind of change my life,
Wow.
and she is, not everybody gets to, see her this way, and they see her, on a public stage, but she's extraordinary, in every way. She's brilliant and compassionate, and she just, cares, so deeply for people and really for making the world a better place. And so I wanted to be, by her side as much as I could and, help her. Because again, right, she was running for the Senate. So, and there were several women that cycle that were running for the Senate. And so I wanted to help all of them, and I wanted to help more women get into the Senate and politics generally. So yeah, I spent a good portion of my life. So that started in around 1998. And, I was positive that Hillary would become president. And, I know as a lot of us were, and it didn't happen.
Yeah.
And so then I was disillusioned again.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, how can this happen in a country, like this, that, so I just
still not being able to cross that barrier, the women being able to cross that final layer. Yeah.
Yes, the glass ceiling.
The glass ceiling, yeah. She recently spoke on one of my favorite podcasts, Prof G with Scott Galloway, and she was brilliant. Yeah, I was like, wow, she's, because now she's a little more relaxed about things. She feels
true.
Yeah. She could just
it's true,
say whatever she wants, and she's she definitely had a lot of good opinions on it.
We're both girls from Chicago, and we talk about that all the time. And she just wants a hot dog, and same with me. So we have a lot in common, and yeah, she's very, very special.
Well, so that's how we kind of come to this kind of present moment. In 2021, you had the place out in the Hamptons, East Hampton. And it's a modernist building, correct? And that kind of relates a little bit to your home growing up, right? And so you're literally, the threads of your life kind of connect crazy.
It's really amazing.
You found the house. Was it always important? Did you find the house and decide to do Onna House, or reverse? Did you decide the project first and then found the house?
So I was ready. So my brand closes. I'm kind of ready for my next move. I don't like to sit still. I always like to have a project. And it's now COVID, and we're all, stuck in our houses. And I decide that I miss that collaboration that I had with, whether it was, the 5 women who sat with me in, my store, in my design studio. I love that, camaraderie. And so I missed that. And I said, you know what, let me try to find a place where I can go and bring in other like-minded creatives, and let's see what that can look like. I didn't know exactly what I wanted to do yet.
Okay.
So sure enough, on Instagram, there's a call out to the universe saying, can someone please save this house? And so I looked, and I look at the house, and I look again. I was like, wait a minute, this looks eerily familiar. And sure enough, what it reminded me of was the house that I spent a good portion of my childhood in Riverwoods, Illinois. Nice. And so I said to Richard, let's drive out to the Hamptons and check out this house. And, he's always up for an adventure, and he knows I'm always looking for something new. So we did, and I pulled up to the house, and it was the dead of winter, and the house is not looking particularly great, but I could tell.
The bones.
I said, this is it. It also looked like, it looked like the baby sister of the house that I grew up in.
No way, that's crazy.
And I
said,
wow, it was freezing cold outside, but I got chills, in more ways than one. And so we went through a very difficult process to purchase this house. It wasn't easy. And, but I knew that it was going to be worth it, but I did not know exactly what I was going to do with it yet.
Okay.
That, would come after several things happened. So one of the first things that happened is that getting back to my advocacy work for women, this is the time where women were not treated particularly well. You probably remember during COVID, especially Asian women were, kind of
targeted.
Bullied and targeted. And so that was one thing that was going on. And then it was right on the edge of Roe v. Wade being overturned, which happened, I think, in maybe, in the middle of 2022.
That's right.
And so I said that it's not a good time for women in this country. And I, in the past tried in such a big way, whether it was through, major democratic politics or, my reproductive rights activism, I always thought, like, I can save the world, and then I realized I cannot do that. That is not going to happen. We are going backwards, if anything. We fight, and we're worse off than we were, years before. So I said, wow, I had an aha moment. And I looked at this house and I said, I'm going to try to help one woman at a time. Not save the world anymore. I'm going to help one artist at a time. And that's when I decided that this house would be a place where I can show the work of women artists exclusively. And I named it Onna House. Onna, which means woman in Japanese. The house is very Japanese inspired.
Yeah, it has a Japanese inspired.
Yeah.
When I was thinking about it, I was wondering, and I don't know if this is just like a happy circumstance that ended up, but like, it seems like showing women in a home, right? There's this idea of domesticity related to being, and those kind of traditions, and maybe pushing up against that a little bit. I don't know if that was something that crossed your mind, but there's kind of a, what I mean? Almost like reversing that and saying the home is not just this thing, but it's, a place where a woman can be creative and, show their work. I don't know. There's something there that I thought was kind of conceptually interesting.
Yeah, I see where you're going.
Yeah.
I feel like for me, it was when the revelation came to show the work of women artists exclusively, but then to take it one further step and to specialize in craft.
Right. That's what
so that was something that, was always looked at as, women's hobbies. And, you with your craft hobbies, you go to the craft fair in town and set up your little booth, and you men take your big paintings and go into the museums. Nothing against male artists.
No.
But so I didn't agree with that or think that was correct, because I feel like craft is art, and oftentimes, fine art. So we're trying to blur that line between art and craft. We don't see the difference. We don't think people should see the difference. There are, textiles and ceramics and found objects and, things that are thought of as just, as craft in a negative way. Right. And we don't agree.
It comes at kind of a perfect time, as you probably track the art world pretty well. Craft is having a huge moment.
Yes.
You know what I mean? So I don't know if that was kind of serendipity or what, but you've kind of nailed it exactly at the right time, where craft is sort of being elevated now, and perhaps what you're doing is also helping that trajectory upward. So have you been noticing the shift since? Because I had a question. Did you collect craft before, or mostly focus on like contemporary art?
Right. That was one thing that I had also noticed, is that our collection, this pop art from the 60s, out of, I mean, I don't know how many pieces we have, but, you could count on one hand the women.
Oh, really?
That are, represented in the collection. Because, so again, in, the 60s, there were a lot of women, doing, making art.
Mm-hmm.
But they weren't, they didn't become the big names. And so, that was very unfortunate. But as I created Onna House, it just became so much more obvious, and, how wrong that was. And that there were pop artists, there were women pop artists, but, I didn't have that thing in my head to focus on it.
Right.
But then if I think back to my mom's gallery, I'm sure that a lot of the professors, there were some women, but, I have pictures. It's, ceramics and glass. So much craft. And so I'm thinking, like, why did I never include craft? And so it really wasn't on my radar. You had mentioned we have a pop art collection. We have a, minimalist and color field collection.
Yeah.
But, there's like Bridget Riley is in that one.
Yep.
Nikki de Saint-Phal, but, really very few.
Totally.
So now full speed ahead, whole different world.
Yeah.
And everything in my world is about women artists. And it is, it's a shift. And yes, I shifted personally, and the world is
kind of shifting
is
along with you.
Which, I can't say at all that I'm responsible for it, but I'm on board.
You're right.
in a major way. And it feels great.
Tell me about some of the artists and designers that you are loving right now, and what is attracting you to certain designers and craftspeople that you're showing at Onna House?
So, wow. I mean, I think there's over at this point,
you have a big roster,
104 artists. So, I think that what I look for now, which is, it has evolved. We're just having our 5th anniversary.
Yeah.
This is our 5th summer, which is fantastic. So there have been a lot of artists, but now I know, because I see so much. People send me work. I find work. I try to find things that you will not see anywhere else. And I mean, I happen to be wearing, some of this, the jewelry from the artist Tomiko Kawata.
Mm-hmm.
And Tomiko, she just had her 90th birthday.
Wow. And
she's only worked in, like, 90% of her work is in safety pins.
Okay.
So she makes these incredible
I did not realize that they were safety pins until...
And she has giant sculptures that are magnificent. It's like she's an architect and an engineer and an artist. And it's just incredible to see that superb craft. Mm-hmm. It's incredible. And there's, ceramicists that, we started that, 5 years ago, somebody named Jane Yang DeHane. Jane is a beautiful ceramicist that, every time somebody comes into Onna House and they see one of Jane's pots, they're like, I love that. And, even Kelly Klein does gorgeous totems. Carrie Lowell does incredible. There's a goddess mobile hanging in the corner of Onna House, and it's an ode and homage to women's fertility, and there's just, it's endless, the extraordinary work.
Yeah, there's if you had to say, like, what is the ambition of Onna House? Is it to be able to put them on a platform for them to perhaps get representation or sales? I know it's kind of a sales platform, but it's not like the focus, right? It's or how would you?
No,
Is
it actually
it is
it
okay.
is a focus. We just, at the home in East Hampton,
Mm-hmm.
we're not really selling work. You can't come in and say, oh, here's $500 for that ceramic,
Okay.
because we have a commercial space in SoHo that is more like a traditional gallery,
Okay.
and so, but the goal is absolutely to sell the work.
Okay.
And because what helps the artist more, right, than to give them
Absolutely. No, that's
hard
true.
cold cash so that they can make more work.
Right.
We have a show up right now with the extraordinary work of, her name is Aya Miyatake, this beautiful Japanese sculptor. And, we were talking about pricing work, and Aya said, you know what, Lisa, you do the prices. All I really care about is that I have enough money to buy more alabaster so that I can make more work.
Nice.
And I hear that so often. And that is, because the passion is so great from these women that they just want to be able to work and make more art.
Did you feel like the opening the space 2025 in SoHo, November 2025, was a way to continue getting that visibility for them because maybe the Hamptons is a little bit further out? Yeah, what was the idea?
Well, the Hamptons, believe it or not, is incredibly, active. It's by appointment only. So, we do little tours there, and we have to keep it quieter because it's in a residential neighborhood. But the quality of the people that come through there,
yeah.
Great gallerists,
good buyers,
good, clients,
yeah.
gallerists, people from museums.
Right.
There are so many eyes on this work that I think it's really been incredible for the artists. So yes, our mission and our goal is to create visibility for the artists and to give them a platform to show their work because yes, they appear in group shows and, every now and then, but they're not represented. Very small percentage are represented by a gallery yet or have work in museums. So that's the grand goal. And
Wow.
And it has, definitely happened.
What do you see? You say, you always want projects. This is your latest project. How do you see this growing? Are you going to continue opening more spaces, or what do you see for the future of this?
So I think that opening SoHo kind of brought to light for us that we're on a second floor of that building that we talked about,
Which was your former
exactly.
Yeah. That's what I mean. People see how
I launched my design business there in 2007.
Yes.
So I've had that space for a long time.
Yeah.
I think I got the space in 2004, thinking that once upon a time I thought I could be an artist, and I tried my hand at different things. I was like, no, that's not for me. I'm going to help artists in different ways, and so that wasn't that was an experiment. I'm always experimenting, and so I think that from having this space where I'm not getting all the SoHo traffic, so again we're waiting, it's by appointment, but what's happened to us, people have now started coming to us to help them curate their own collections. So
cool.
They want to add
advisors.
They want to add craft.
Yeah.
So they have painting, photograph, and they're like, wow, how do I mix a textile here? How do I put ceramics out? How would I hang, suspend a sculpture, made out of safety pins? Like
Right.
how a lot of people, they like the idea of it, but they're, not as visual. So we've helped several clients, kind of incorporate this type of work in their collections, which has been fantastic. One of the best things we do is a collaboration with a growing brand that's called TWP. They are a fashion brand that TWP is Trish, Wescoat, Pound. And so woman designed, and we work with the business side of the brand to incorporate Onna House art and artists in all of their stores. And they're on fire. Wow. They're opening everywhere you can imagine. Cool. It is fantastic. And we are doing the art for their stores. And so then when somebody saw the art in TWP, then somebody came to us and said, can you do the art for our store? Can you do the art for our restaurant? Can you? And so we're going to do something called Onna House Curates. And, if somebody has a new, let's say the lobby of a residential building or the lobby of a commercial building, one of these gorgeous grand scale textiles rather than, hanging up a big painting. Is something, it adds softness and warmth and it's cozy. And so that's kind of where I see the business can grow in that way, because it's been fantastic. And getting back to TWP for a minute, they are the most generous, loveliest people involved in the brand. They also will go to the artist studios. They want to, not only have the art up, they want to know the artists. Nice.
So they can speak to the client. Yeah.
Yes.
That's
and
great.
They have, and they train their staff to understand the art and the artist. It's not just something pretty hanging on the wall. And then they also so generously dress the artists.
Oh, cool.
So, which is, really, really nice.
That's right. So if you had to think, look on your life, do you want this to kind of be what your legacy is or thought of, even though you've had so many different kind of eras and things? I mean, is this where,
I say
with the politics and the fashion? And
it's all, as you said, it's a thread.
Yeah.
And there've been so many different, so many connections.
Yeah.
But I say to people all the time that for me, this feels like the best thing that I've ever done. We're helping, so many women in so many different ways.
Right.
We're making a difference in their lives. It's, like I said, it's, it's kind of, it feels better just, helping one artist at a time, than trying
has a compound effect eventually.
Yeah, it does. And I think that, it just feels good. One of the things we do when we, tour people around the gallery is, we tell them, because they say, what is it? Like, there's something, they walk into the gallery and they feel something. There's something going on. And I say, you're feeling the hands and the hearts of women in every piece. And it just is this feeling, this aura. And because the women's personal stories are woven into every piece.
Well, I think that's a beautiful place to end. Lisa Perry, thank you for sharing all that. And I actually think you're an artist, actually, in a lot of ways. Like, in the way that you've kind of created all of these connections in your life is similar to how artists build, their work over a long period of time. So, yeah.
Okay.
Congrats.
I'll accept that.
And
thank you.
People can find you, go to onnahouse.com or
onnahouse.com for, to see the gallery. They can make an appointment
or your Instagram, which you're active on.
Info at onnahouse.com. I do all my own Instagram. People can DM me. I talk to everybody. But it's a pleasure talking to you. And you're incredible at your research.
Thanks.
Well done, you.
Thank you. All right, guys. Thanks for joining me. I hope you enjoyed my conversation with Lisa Perry. It's really important that you guys subscribe, or actually, if you just send this to a friend who you think might be interested, it's really good for the channel. Been getting a lot of good feedback. It's building. Our Instagram follow is building. So want to keep it going. Want to keep bringing these awesome guests. So subscribe, like, comment, send me an email. Love you guys. Let's see you on the next episode.